Experts warn that Iran is less than 1 month away from nuclear breakout. 4 out of the 6 terrorists who escaped from prison here in Israel have now been recaptured, and you'll never guess who helped the Israeli police. Stay tuned. This is the Israel Guys.
Welcome to the Israel Guys, where we believe that in a world of fake news, you should connect to the true and authentic stories of Israel. Guys, if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that. Ring the notification bell and leave us a comment. We love comments. Also, if you want to see more content like this, just go to theisraelguys.com and you'll find a lot more. Right. Also, go to our Patreon page. We need, really enjoy those who support us. And we can't do this show without those people. Really, it really helps. So go ahead and support us. You know what? If you really want your neighbor to know, sometimes you want to watch things and not let everybody know about it. But no, when you're watching the Israel Guys, everybody needs to know that you're an Israel guy. So how the best way to do that is go ahead and get the T-shirt. This is not the T-shirt. The T-shirt looks fantastic. Hey, right here on the screen. Go ahead and get the T-shirt or bumper sticker?
Yeah, or sticker. Yeah. Check it out. It's all at theisraelguys.com.
That's right. Luke, there's so much to talk about. I mean, we've got way too much to talk about because so much is happening in Israel.
And by the way, we're recording this a day early, and you're going to get it a day early, and that's because Israel is going into Yom Kippur tonight, which is the Day of Atonement. And not only does the entire country shut down, the airport even shuts down in a couple hours from the time of this recording. All air traffic stops in Israel, and it does not resume until 11 o'clock tomorrow night after Yom Kippur. So I think that's
as well as everything. Luke, streets are closed, cities are closed, everything's closed, no traffic, children is having a heyday out.
The most bikes. Closed day of the year.
Yeah, the children, all the highways become places for children to ride their bikes. Literally everything shuts down. It's quite an interesting holiday. Not a holiday, it's fast day.
Yeah, it's
here in Israel.
Solemn day of the year.
Very solemn day. Luke, Iran. Let's get right to it.
Recent reports from the IAEA, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency, show that Iran is less than 1 month away from nuclear breakout capacity. This basically means that they'll have enough enriched uranium to build an atomic bomb in 1 month or less. That doesn't mean that they'll have a bomb in a month. Hopefully not, anyways. Experts say anywhere from a couple of months to maybe up to a year. I'd say that's being very generous. By the time that they could actually have a nuclear bomb, a missile that could shoot around the world, definitely hit Israel. And this is the closest that Iran's ever come to having nuclear weapons since the 2015 Iran deal was put into place and implemented.
If that doesn't make you cringe, I don't know what does. Because when you think about all-out jihadist, terrorist organizations, and when it is all in one nation and they got a nuclear bomb, just that close to a nuclear bomb, that should make the world really be let's do something about this.
And they just elected a butcher who's responsible for mass murdering 30,000 people back in the 1980s as their new president.
Yeah.
So you should be playing. In the meantime, the United States is still trying to get Iran to go back to the 2015 Iranian deal. I think they're getting close to giving up.
You know what I just thought of?
They're still working on it.
You're a parent, I'm a parent. We think about things where we're, you count to three. Some parents like to count to three. I don't like to count to three thing. I like my child to just do what I tell him to do when I tell him to do it. But I think for some reason I have this thing that Blinken, he's one of those count to three guys.
He's counting to three for Iran.
1, 2,
2.5.
2.5. What? They're about to get a nuclear bomb, and you're just we're hoping that the diplomatic process will work its way through.
They might wipe out the world.
Right.
But we're 2 3/4.
Yeah, right. Yeah. He's still counting right now. We're at here's what Gantz, this is the defense minister, says. He says the current U.S. approach of putting the Iranian nuclear program back in a box, I'd accept that.
Interesting.
So it's interesting that the defense minister of Israel, could be considered central leftist kind of a individual, maybe center, maybe more.
Yes,
Gantz.
but when it comes to security, he's pretty strong.
Left.
Pretty strong, I would say.
Yeah, but he also has very leftist
he's
ideas.
Left wing,
we'll find out more of that.
He does a fairly good job as defense minister.
Yeah, he's not a weak individual.
Anyways, yeah.
Anyway, we could argue about what our stances are. So
he wants to see the United States have basically a plan B, a backup plan, which which he says is sanctions, economic sanctions, like very harsh and severe sanctions, because he says Israel doesn't have that. I guess because they're such a small country, Israel doesn't really have the ability to make a huge impact with sanctions on Iran.
Right.
My sanctions were working when Trump was in office. They were laid on Iran. And Benny Gantz wants to see the United States go back to that because the U.S. and other bigger countries have that ability to push Iran back. But my question is, at one point, do you have to say, okay, we've counted to 3. The 2015 deal is not on an option anymore. Sanctions are not working. At what point, because Israel's basically, what Israel can bring to the table in this scenario is military action.
Yeah.
And
that's what Gantz
we're pretty
hinted
sure
at,
they've
actually.
already brought undercover action because of all the explosions and things and assassinations that have been happening.
Right.
Israel doesn't take. They haven't said it's them, but most people, the Mossad's definitely been at work.
Right. Well, Gantz hinted at a plan C, which means he says Israel can't really come to the plan B. That has to be America.
Yeah, plan
so
B,
that sounds like a
sanctions.
little weakness on his part, saying Israel can't just take care of itself by itself. I think Israel can take care of itself by itself. The defense minister doesn't necessarily think so, but he does give a plan C that if it does come down to it, he says Israel would be involved in a military action. So he doesn't write it out, but he says plan C, that's pretty bad off. Plan B would be much better if America would step in here, which I agree. It would be great for America to step in and help in this situation. At the current state of American politics, I kind of really doubt that something.
We'll see.
We'll find out. I would love to see America step up to the plate again and be America and kick some backsides of some terrorists. That would be really great.
I would definitely say that the plan C, as far as military actions against Iran, might come to that within the year.
Yeah.
Within the next 12 months, you might see that.
Yeah. So Gantz is very he's hoping that the diplomatic route will work, but he's very skeptical. Very skeptical, saying that the diplomatic American process that they can coerce the Iranians.
Well, they've been working
into
on
a
it
plan.
for months, and it hasn't worked so far. Even as far as they won't talk to the American negotiators. So that's not
Here's
a good
Gantz's
sign.
plan, Luke. He says, let's get a viable backup plan. If the American thing doesn't come through within a few, we got a month, maybe a little bit more than a month. So if it doesn't come through quickly, this is what he says. Political, diplomatic, and economic pressure imposed on Tehran by the United States, Europe, Russia, and China. So it's interesting that his plan is to get a lot of nations involved and put some pressure on here. He says China is essential. We've got to get China because Iran has a lot of trade agreements with China.
Right.
And when you really go to twist the arm, you need somebody that really has some impact.
Yeah.
He says America is the one to organize this, to orchestrate this sanctions against
Would be
Iran
nice.
using China, which would be the biggest punch to get China on board. Now, for all those nations to work together, my gracious, that's I don't know if that's the days we live in right now.
Might be wishful thinking.
All right.
But he does say Israel is preparing, and in his words, if push comes to shove, we'll get there.
Yeah, well,
And according to history, Israel always gets there.
That's
so
right.
Iran, you might want
out.
to look out. We had a meeting that happened this week, something that hasn't happened in 10 years, and that's Prime Minister Naftali Bennett met with Egyptian Prime Minister Sisi.
Yeah.
And that has not happened in 10 years, and they are already since that meeting, and a very warm meeting, as far as they had both flags of both countries represented, which I understand has not happened at any meetings in the past. They laid foundations for deeper ties down the road. They talked about issues concerning state security, economic affairs, and I believe, Egypt Air has already announced that they're going to start weekly flights between Cairo and Tel Aviv in October. But it didn't escape the issue of a two-state solution for the Palestinians. Egypt's prime minister said that he wants to. I think Egypt wants to be the peace mediator.
Yeah.
And they keep pushing that, so they're trying to be super friendly right now. They're trying to be very helpful, and they want to see themselves as the negotiator between Israel and the Palestinians for peace in the Middle East, which in his eyes is a two-state solution.
I would say not only peace in the Middle East, Luke, but also as cozying up to the Biden administration. Egypt sees that if they can get close to the Biden administration and fulfill some of the Biden administration goals, they can become this hotshot in the Middle East and become this Egyptian empire again. They're not really that big. As far as America is concerned, America provides military supplies to both Egypt and Israel. Very much so. They supply. They're the two biggest in the world, from what I understand. So there's a lot of cooperation between Egypt and the United States, as well as Israel and the United States. So this is a pretty big deal for Egypt to be working with America at Israel for a peace agreement. You remember back in the day when all the peace talks were going on with the Abraham Accord talks and all that stuff? We were like super concerned at the end of the day that this was all going to boil into one big topic, and that being everything was going to hinge on. We ended up being wrong, actually. We thought it was all going to hinge on whether they were going to create a Palestinian state.
Right.
I think it's still in the backdrop. I really do. I think it's still in the backdrop of all the Abraham Accords. If you go into all it just never came to fruition.
Right.
At the backdrop of all these accords and all these peace with the Arab nations, at the end of the day, all of them still say you must create a Palestinian state. Every single one of these nations say this. All the peace agreements.
There's no talk of peace without the idea of a Palestinian state and a two-state solution.
And so Egypt, I think, is like at the forefront of that, because here they are the closest with America in the region.
Right.
And with the current government, they're seeing an opportunity to really jump in and push a two-state solution. So that's concerning to me, especially when you have a government that's liking the idea of a two-state solution and wanting to help in Gaza, help Hamas. They're not going to say they're going to help Hamas, but how can you work in Gaza without helping Hamas? Like, there's a lot of breakdown.
Well, speaking of Gaza, Foreign Minister Yair Lapid has come out with this huge glorified plan of rebuilding Gaza, but it kind of, well, not kind of, it all hinges on Hamas behaving and the Palestinian Authority being a key player in that rebuilding.
You know, Yair Lapid's a serious fellow, and he's earned his right to his position, and he's worked up, and he's a hardworking fellow. But I just really seriously have a problem with this proposal.
Right.
And I don't think it's ever going to go anywhere, because there's so many, like, what in the world were you thinking when you wrote this out? Like, I really don't understand. It's a lot like the Abraham Accords. Like, he's really trying to create, like, in his own mind, like a state around the Palestinian Authority. All through here, you see them trying to connect Gaza and the Palestinian areas of the PA areas together. So Hamas and the Fatah, trying to pull these guys together. So Yair Lapid, his thing's called the economy for security.
So instead of security, which leads to economy, it's economy, which will lead to security.
That's like a leftist ideology at its finest.
Right.
We're going to give you all of this.
We're going to give you everything you want.
Right.
And in return, is that kind of like America
and then you're going to do what you want me to.
Giving the Taliban everything they want and expecting them to behave in return?
You're going to be really nice once I give you all this stuff, right?
Right.
Wrong. I'm going to use it to shoot you in the head, right? That's exactly what happens every single time. That's not how it works. So according to Yair Lapid, in order to defeat Hamas, we have to help them through economics and through diplomatic means.
Right.
In my opinion, Luke, that's flawed thinking. That you think that you're going to be able to help more money. Okay, if it's about money, we have the stats. 28 times the amount that went into rebuilding Europe after World War II. It's called the Marshall Plan. 28 times, I believe, the amount of money that went into rebuilding Europe after World War II has gone into trying to establish this little tiny spot called so-called Palestine. And what's there to show of it? A really corrupt,
less than nothing,
multiple factions of terrorist organizations fighting each other and killing one another. That's what you have to show for 28 times the amount of money that's gone into this place to try to do this? Absolutely not. There's no way that if money's the answer, it would have been solved a long time ago. So let's say,
so here's what
it's not
basically, tell me if I'm wrong. Lapid is basically saying he's going to tell Gaza, okay, Hamas is leading you to ruin, but we're going to work with Gaza, and we're going to send money, infrastructure, build the economy in Gaza, and as long as Hamas behaves, we'll continue with that. As soon as they start misbehaving, we're going to stop that. So that's the plan. Gazans are supposed to support that idea because we know the average Gazan in the street is very oppressed, and they probably they do hate Hamas because they're oppressive. It's like the Taliban being in control of your government. But then he says, okay, but the Palestinian Authority, which is the lesser of the two evils, is going to control the border crossings. So right now, Israel controls the border crossings, right?
Yeah.
Humanitarian aid going in and out, or going in, money going in, that and exports coming out, right? What they're going to hand that over to the Palestinian Authority and just trust them to make sure everything goes according to plan.
Luke, that was the part I just literally I was concerned, but I almost laughed. Like, that's never going to happen. They're never going to get, for one, Fatah and Hamas are never going to be like, oh, yes, okay, you can have the border now.
For an example, they've been trying to figure out how to restart the money that is needed to go to help Gazans,
like
right?
the suitcases
but
of $100
before,
bills.
They always had the problem before of it goes into the hands of Hamas and its corruption, right? So they were trying to work with the Palestinian Authority and the banks and things like that, and UN banks to make sure that it got into the actual correct hands. Palestinian Authority this past week, they pulled out and said, we don't want to have anything to do with it. So basically now Israel's forced to go back to the suitcases of cash. And we do mean literal suitcases of cash that they just put on a truck and send into Gaza, which ends up in the hands of Hamas and doesn't help anybody.
Well, it not only doesn't help anybody, it ends up in rockets fired at Israeli citizens.
Exactly.
Like, that's what it ends up being. So first, the plan is, Luke, they're going to upgrade the humanitarian reconstruction of Gaza first. So they're going to focus on the reconstruction, rebuilding. That's electrical, everything, repairs, gas, water, everything, all the infrastructure, even including like a desalination plant built there, which is that's modern technology.
Right.
Like, that's pretty
Which
serious.
is needed. I mean, Gaza's
healthcare systems, like all this stuff that most modern Western nations have that many Islamic run Arab nations don't have. They want to create this into a westernized place. So that's like phase one. And the hope is that this is going to make
in exchange
Hamas
for it,
quiet.
Hamas is supposed to be quiet.
Yeah.
So that's the deal.
Yeah.
We'll do this. You have to be quiet in return.
Yeah. And the international, this is what it also
Which, by the way,
right.
they've been shooting rockets in the past week, so it should go great.
Right. Here's the other funny thing, Luke. So if they don't keep quiet, just so they know they're going to have a problem with Hamas, because Hamas is going to be problematic. They're a terrorist organization. They know they're not dealing with Hamas. They're trying to go in and deal, and they're trying to create the PA, as we talked about, as governing in Hamas territory, Gaza, right? So if that doesn't work, who's going to be in charge of dealing with Hamas now? In the plan, Lapid's plan here, the international community is going to be in charge of holding Hamas to the feet to the fire and saying you can't buy weapons, you can't kill Jews, this kind of thing. Let me know if that works.
I'm sure the UN, the United Nations, they'll pass some resolutions or something.
Right, the UN is going to pass a revolution against them, a revolution. That's what we need. Is a revolution. That's what we need down there. But they're not going to pass anything. Taking Hamas and telling them they can't kill Jews. They never have and they never will. This is the security formula. According to Lapid, he says, quote, the security formula during the first stage is simple. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has already outlined it. In exchange for quiet, we will give more quiet than before. If quiet is breached, Hamas and the other terrorist organizations need to know that the response will be harsher than before. So it's based on how many rockets you shoot at us, and we'll give based on how many Jews you kill. If you don't kill Jews, we'll give you more. If you kill Jews, we'll back off a little bit. Okay, this is still a very broken system.
Bad idea.
Second phase, Luke, and this is what really gets me. This is investment in large infrastructure. Large infrastructure, like an island.
Wow. How about like a private island?
A private island off the coast of Gaza as a new port. Now, why would you? Okay, we're going to build an island now off of this terrorist city that's bombing us like crazy, and they're attacking us and causing all this infrastructural damage to Israel and killing citizens. We're going to come and we're going to build you a $2 million port. How about that? And the international community, we're going to get to do that, and not to mention,
and the goal is to strengthen the Palestinian Authority, like putting them in charge of the border crossings. And they want the end goal to be a two-state solution, according to Yair Lapid. Okay,
can I just say something I just thought about this? You know what they're trying to do? Boy, this is brilliant. Capital of the Palestinian state.
Oh, an island. Yeah,
Gaza.
there you go.
An island in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. This is what they're shooting for. I can almost guarantee it.
The scary part about this plan is that Yair Lapid has already talked about it with leaders in Egypt, Gulf states, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and the Russian foreign minister and officials in the EU. So I hope he doesn't get too much support, because this plan would definitely be a bad idea, and we don't want to see it come to fruition.
Look, this is really... I just brainstormed. Maybe the island is a great idea. Capital of the Palestinian state is no longer Jerusalem. It's an island out in the middle of the Mediterranean somewhere.
And then they can just move?
They could just...
Problem
solved. Lapid may be on to something here. I don't know.
Don't hold your breath.
We need to do a little more research on
Josh,
this. I'm not sure.
Move on. But before we wrap up, I definitely want to talk about. We talked about the terrorists that escaped from the prison last week.
Yeah.
Right. 4 of them have been recaptured, and the people that helped recapture them, you'll never believe who it was.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a second. But the Fatah and Palestinian Authority, because Palestinian Authority is Fatah, called for a popular uprising. And Palestinian Media Watch they've already proven that the term popular uprising is violence and terrorism. That's what the knife intifada in 2015 and 16 was. It was a popular uprising. 40 people were killed, including 2 Americans, in that uprising, aka intifada. But since the 6 terrorists escaped from prison last week. Fatah calls for a popular uprising all across Judea and Samaria and all the Palestinian territories. Since then, all this week, 3 terror attacks have been carried out. 2 in Jerusalem, 1 in Gush Etzion Junction. 2 of them were actually just yesterday. 1 in Jerusalem, just outside the central bus station. Guy used a kitchen knife, 17-year-old, to stab and wound 2 Israelis before he was shot by a police officer. Gush Etzion Junction tried to use a screwdriver to stab soldiers. I'm not sure why you think
just want to die
work.
if you do that.
And then earlier this week, a terrorist tried to stab security officers in the old city of Jerusalem with a knife. And all 3 of these attacks were in response to the government that is to the organization that is in control of the government of the Palestinian Authority, which Lapid is trying to put in charge of the border crossings into Gaza. So,
who they want to be
peaceful,
in charge of the whole situation.
Very peaceful.
This is the government they want to be in charge of the two
But they're
Palestinian
better
state.
than Hamas.
Better. Yeah.
And now Israel's security forces are preparing for an even bigger uptick in terrorism. Part of it has to do with Yom Kippur. They've stationed 2,000 additional police officers in Jerusalem. And according to the police, they've already thwarted a huge terrorist attack this past Monday, but they won't say what details are because it's under a gag order. I'm sure we'll find that out very soon. But the good news is 4 out of the 6 terrorists have been recaptured. And I think this is really interesting because it's coming out now that 6 terrorists escaped from prison. Their plan was, because they're in the north of Israel, they're not close to Judea and Samaria where all the Palestinian areas are, right? Their plan was, we'll go to Arab villages, like Israeli Arab villages, and we'll find support in the villages, and Arab Israelis will help us escape. Okay, when they were caught, they were like exhausted, hungry, and what they comes to find out now is they went into Arab villages, including Nazareth. They kept stopping. They would ask for rides from Arab Israelis. They would ask for food and for water. Everybody turned them down, and everybody called the police, which I think is really amazing.
Right.
You're
saying these are Arab citizens of Israel.
Arab Israeli citizens.
Yeah.
Okay, but you hear about, so you do have both sides of the story, because there are a lot of Arab Israelis that, like a few months ago during the war with Gaza, you had riots and protests and just awful things happening from Israeli citizens. But you also have on the other side, you have Zionist Arab Israeli citizens. And the police actually reported dozens of Israeli Arabs phoned the police with information regarding the whereabouts of the terrorists. In both instances where they were caught, 2 were caught, and then the 2 others were caught, it was Arab Israelis who reported them to the police, which aided in their capture. 2 of them fled to Nazareth and requested food from the locals. They were refused and instead reported to the police. Public Security Minister Omer Bar-Lev vowed the remaining 2 fugitives would be caught, haven't been caught yet, and thanked Arab Israelis who assisted in the capture of the terrorists. Quote, for 4 days, the escapees wandered around believing they would find shelter and help among Arab Israelis, but they were mistaken. Everywhere they turned, Arab citizens refused them and called police. Much respect to all the responsible citizens. So that just goes to show you that there are Zionist Arab Israelis living in Israel, and we want to say more power to you. And
I don't know if I would go that far.
There are some that hate Israel.
There also is just common sense people that don't want to be in the same jail cell these terrorists are in. If you help this guy, you are going to go to jail probably for the rest of your life. Citizens. Yeah, they're just. There are Zionist Arab Israelis. They serve in the IDF. But I did just get a call the other day from one as well.
Yes, we did, actually.
Unbelievable. This guy lives locally, and he calls me and says he's a pro-Israel.
Not an Arab Israeli, a Palestinian. Palestinian living in a large.
So you better believe it. But there's also some people that just with some basic common sense that say, I don't want to spend the rest of my life in jail. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to stab a soldier with a screwdriver, and I'm not going to help a terrorist try to get into Area A. PA Area A. So there you have it, guys. It's all across the spectrum. Yes, you have
Palestinians and Arab Israelis that hate Israel, commit violence against Israel. But you also have Palestinians and Arab Israelis who are Zionists and want to help Israel, and also just responsible citizens. And we say thank you to those. Guys, that is what's actually happening here in the land of Israel. Make sure you tune out the fake news and tune into what is the real and authentic stories here in the heartland of Israel. We'll be back next week right here at the Israel Guys.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Go ahead and subscribe if you like that content. We can get it to you every week right there at your fingertips. If you really liked it and have questions, anything, we love comments. Go ahead and leave us a comment as well. If you'd like to even go further, your support would be greatly appreciated. We've got lots of content, lots of ideas that we want to keep pushing out there. If you want to support, you can go to our Patreon page or check us out at theisraelguys.com.